I can just see that we've got a load of issues coming up in the gold market, which I think could be extremely important. And there is another question, and I go all the way back to 2002, when Frank Venerosa stood up at a conference in Chile and said, after he'd done his research, that he didn't know how much gold there was out on lease, but he estimated it could be anything between 10 and 14,000 tons, bearing in mind that that upper figure was roughly half the total gold at that time in central bank reserves. So, what's the position today? I think there has been a refinement in terms of, firstly, how the gold is used, and secondly, where it may be stored. So you have this. We saw this actually with GLD. You can make a case for the original purpose of a derivative, and that is, this was going way back. A farmer would, he would sell his product. He could see that, all wheat was coming on the market at the same time. So, when he was about to deliver his wheat, he would find that, the price was absolute rubbish because everybody else was delivering at the same time. How do you hedge against that? Well, the answer is that you can sell your wheat forward on a derivative exchange and to capture the prices which are more akin to where they are out of harvest. That was really the beginning of the Chicago Exchange. So I think that that sort of sensible use of a derivative market, there is always a role for. But where they have become used by banks who've got no skin in the underlying game, just as to punt it around and as a source of manipulating profits, that is going to die. At the end of this period of financialization, as currencies begin to collapse, it's the bit about the tide going out and who's wearing the shorts. It's that problem. And one thing I always say to people, the point about gold is that you don't buy it to trade it, you buy it to spend it. You'll end up spending it. Now you can't spend COMEX contracts. Those you trade, okay, trade, take your life into your own hands, trade them, great. But when it comes to physical gold, the reason you buy it is you want to have at least a portion of your wealth in something that is going to survive a currency Armageddon. Now, what we have with the current interest rate situation is the makings of a currency Armageddon. And we should look at what they're doing with rubles, we should look at what they're doing with yuan and a new currency in Central Asia, and conclude that there are some people who've got a bloody good idea of what's going on, who are opting out of the Western currency system. Why are they doing it? The answer, to my mind, is actually quite simple, and that is that all the malfeasance that's been going on about interest rates. What is inflation? They keep on saying that inflation is rising prices. No, it's not. It's a debasement of the currency. Why do they insist on leaving currency out of it? I remember seeing, I was obviously bored. I read one of the FOMC statements a couple of months ago, and there was no mention of money in it. This is the Federal Open Market Committee, which basically deals with the money. They never mention money. What is going on here? And the answer is quite simple. They don't want us to understand that actually what they're doing is debasing the currency in order to pay the government's bills, in order to pay the politicians' ambitions for spending this, that, and the other thing. If we actually understood that, the whole system would fall apart tomorrow. That's why they insist on not telling us what inflation is. It's not a question of inflation, it's debauchment of the currency. I think what will happen is that at some point we will tie our currencies back to gold. Simply because we can't operate like Venezuela. I mean, apart from anything else, the only reason that Venezuela operates is because there are enough US dollars in circulation, which nobody talks about, to keep things going. We're talking about a situation where even that's not available. So under those circumstances, I think what will happen, and we've seen this time and time again, I mean, it happened, for example, at the end of the Second World War in Hong Kong. The military yen was completely valueless. But what did the Hong Kong cadets do, like Calcuthwaite and all the rest of it? What they did basically was they said, okay, we will introduce a new Hong Kong dollar, which is based on the US dollar, but we will do an exchange rate, and it was something like, I can't remember, it's something like 5,000 to 1 for the existing worthless Japanese military yen. I mean, but the point was they needed to get the stuff into circulation, and this was the way to do it. And that tells me that the way out of this eventually will be for the central banks to turn their existing currency in circulation into gold substitutes. Now, for that to work, I mean, bear in mind that we're going to go down a pretty nasty road before we get there. I mean, we could easily see a conversion rate of sort of $100,000 to 1, to an ounce, or even more. I don't know. I mean, just pick numbers out of a hat. Bear in mind, we're not talking about gold going up. We're talking about dollars going down and sterling going down. And, at that stage, I doubt actually if the euro will still exist. I mean, that really is the biggest bag of worms you can imagine. But the currency is a matter for the users. It is you and I exchanging our skills, storing our skills in the form of money before we spend it. It is us who actually take that decision. This is why gold and silver have always been money, and currencies are something different. It's not a function of government to do this. I think I've always felt that one of the benefits of silver is that it's actually not owned by central banks. And what I mean by that is that if things start falling over sort of, let's say, fairly slowly, by slowly I mean, say, takes 6 months, somewhere along there you will find that we're going to ban ownership of gold, gold coins, except for limited jewelry or whatever. Now, they could well do that, but they're not going to do it against silver. So under those circumstances, silver, I think, does actually have a very, very important role in what we're about to see.